people often have, really profound breakthroughs and realizations, and they understand the root of why they're behaving the way they are and why life is manifesting in a certain way, because ultimately we're always creating our own reality. And so when we work on that level, it's far more likely to stick than when we're working on a more shallow level. We're just working on the externals, trying to fix our lives or whatever. So that's one part. The other part of it is really being intentional about how we bring that home. And so, we've developed frameworks, and I call it, the momentum map. So we during the event itself, when we're in that moment of clarity, when we're in that place of, understanding whatever, we spend time thinking about how do we want to bring this back home, really anticipating what that might look like when we get back home, anticipating what the resistance might look like.
Your business's success depends on relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Ponto. Each week I bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week I'm excited to connect with Mike Brcic. Mike is a father of three, an adventurer, and the founder of Wayfinders Events, a company that takes founders and leaders on multi-day wilderness expeditions to places like Iceland, Bhutan, Patagonia, and Colombia. He believes the most important conversations in a leader's life rarely happen in a boardroom. They happen around the fire, a mountain, or in the silence after something has cracked you open. Through Wayfinders, he designs experiences that blend awe, skilled facilitation, and genuine community, the kind where people stop performing and start connecting. His community is nearly half women, has return rates of over 75%, and his alumni don't describe what they do as a retreat. They describe it as a return. Mike is based in Toronto, where he lives for a time in wild places and is endlessly curious about what becomes possible when people feel truly seen. Congrats on your impact with Wayfinders, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to be here, Carl, talking about something so near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, and I think it's something that I've touched on with other guests in the past, but not to the extent I think we're going to touch on today, which is just how much the environment impacts how people interact. So when you're in an office location with the fluorescent lights and everyone's in dressed up for business, and there's just the atmosphere changes the way people behave and how much they're willing to be vulnerable and open up and be themselves versus how they think people want them to behave. And so I really like the idea of getting people out into nature and into different environments, because it really allows them to connect on a deeper level. So how did you get started with this, or what do you see as a way people can apply this for their businesses and their relationships?
Yeah, I'll answer the latter part of your question first. The lens that I look at this through human connection, and I'm talking about deep, real, genuine human connection. I often view it through the lens of safety, and safety is simply meaning, can I just show up and be myself with this person or with this group or whatever, or are there certain parts of myself or beliefs or whatever that I need to sort of keep hidden because I'm not sure if it's safe to bring that into the conversation. And real, true, deep, genuine human connection happens when two or more people feel really safe with each other. They feel like they can bring their whole selves will be accepted, they will feel like they belong, in the room, in the conversation, and that they don't have to shapeshift, they don't have to put on a mask, they don't have to put on armor in order to participate in this conversation. And so the environment, of course, the other person, other people, of course, have a big impact on that, but so does the environment. And so typically at work, especially if you're talking about the type of work, you're talking about fluorescent lights and, maybe we have demanding boss or whatever. Often our nervous system is already dysregulated in that type of environment. And so it's hard to connect with people when your nervous system is dysregulated. And so when we take people, to these wild places, we connect them deeply to nature. We connect them deeply to themselves. We lean intentionally into silence. People's guards come down. They feel like they can just show up and be themselves, and it feels safe. And just to give you an example, I was in Iceland a couple of weeks ago, leading an event there with my co-facilitator Philip McKernan. We really leaned into the power of silence. And so we would go on these long hikes through the wilderness, and we would tell people, we want you to spend the first hour of this walk completely in silence. And it's quite a unique experience to have 25 people just walking through this big, profound, vast wilderness, totally in silence. And a lot of people, it was uncomfortable at first. It felt awkward. And then after one particular hike, we stopped on this ridge, this, beautiful, beautiful view. You could see the fjord, you could see waterfalls around. We were at, top of the valley. And I just asked the group to sit there for 20 more minutes in silence. And afterwards, we did a little bit of a debrief and asked them, what was that experience like? And, to a person, they said it was a really profound experience for them. These are people who often don't take any time for silence. One person said it was the calmest he'd felt in, he couldn't even name how long, at least 20 years or 30 years. And when you're in that state, it's so much easier to connect with other people. So I'm always a big advocate of people just like connecting with themselves first, and then that gives you a great opportunity to connect with others. As to the part of the connection, how did this start? Or the question, how did this start? My first event was in September of 2017, and it wasn't really, I didn't really intend to, create the thing that I've created now. It was just, I wanted to create a conference, quote unquote conference for entrepreneurs that was based on connection first. And I knew that, people, when they're outside, they're doing fun, challenging things together, they tend to connect a lot better than they would inside a boardroom or, conference room or even over lunch. And so my first few events were, we'd be out hiking, we'd be out biking, whatever, and then we'd come back and we'd talk about business, stuff like that. But over time, it's really morphed where we really don't spend a lot of time talking about business. We talk about the real stuff that's going on in our lives.
Yeah, I love that. And the 20 minutes of silence after the hour of silence walking, and that guy saying that he felt the calmest he had in years is really profound. And it's something that I think a lot of people don't realize how much they miss or need that pause, that silence, because they're, especially these days with all the devices and notifications and all these things constantly vying for our attention, that your nervous system, your brain is constantly overloaded and is not, it hasn't evolved to handle that many different stimuli. And so it's causes a lot of stress. And so I think it's just that one revelation or the one epiphany the guy had about the importance of silence and how, even though don't have to necessarily go out into a Icelandic fjord to get that moment of silence, but just being able to appreciate the importance of it and block out time for that calm, quiet connection with oneself is really important. And I think a huge takeaway. And I can see how, the amount of connection you achieve from not doing something beyond just like going to a lunch or something in an office, and getting out and just doing things with people that are not work related, even though you know them from a work context, is very profound, because it helps you see them and remember that they are a whole person, not just their job title or their position in a company.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And
so when you're working with people on these retreats, and you're like, because one of the things that I've often had struggled with myself when it comes to these sort of like seminars or workshops or these retreats, is that you go and you do the thing and you get really excited or you get the impact, and you go right back to your normal routine, and you don't really retain you don't build any new habits from just a single retreat or a single like conference. So how do you help people work what they realize during these retreats into their daily lives better? What are some suggestions you have for people that want to maintain the results they got from a retreat?
Mm-hmm. Well, I have a two-part answer to that. And the first part of the answer is we're doing deeper work. We're helping people uncover the patterns that, that keep them stuck. They may say they want a particular thing, or, whatever that may be, money, love, who knows what it is. And yet they're unaware of the patterns in the subconscious, systems and beliefs that are actually keeping them from that thing. So we're working at that level and helping people really dig into that and understand that. And so, every day typically has a couple hours of facilitation time where we're, in group together and we're exploring, these themes. Sometimes it's the whole group together. Sometimes we're in small groups. Sometimes we break, one facilitator with one group, various different modalities. And we're working on that deeper level. And people often have, really profound breakthroughs and realizations, and they understand the root of why they're behaving the way they are and why life is manifesting in a certain way, because ultimately we're always creating our own reality. And so when we work on that level, it's far more likely to stick than when we're working on a more shallow level. We're just working on the externals, trying to fix our lives or whatever. So that's one part. The other part of it is really being intentional about how we bring that home. And so, we've developed frameworks, and I call it, the momentum map. So we during the event itself, when we're in that moment of clarity, when we're in that place of, understanding whatever, we spend time thinking about how do we want to bring this back home, really anticipating what that might look like when we get back home, anticipating what the resistance might look like, because if it's big enough, there will always be resistance. And then being able to plan around that, but also being able to be intentional about, like, who is my support crew that's going to help me through this, right? It could be other people at the event, it could be people back home or whatever, but if the change we desire is big enough, we are going to find all sorts of ways to sabotage that. And so we need to anticipate that, we need to plan for it, we need to marshal people and resources and whatever we need in order to sustain that momentum. So our goal is to help people with the clarity and then come up with a plan for when they get home. And then we also do, we do integration calls and stuff like that. People stay connected through the WhatsApp group and they're supporting each other, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think there's a lot, most people don't really understand how much our brains are wired to resist these sorts of big changes and to self-sabotage, and how and I'm going to tying back to the initial idea behind this episode, is that the situation you're in has a bigger influence on your behavior than people realize. So if they're back in their house or back in an office, it's very easy just to slip back into the old habits. And so having that intentional mindset and a plan for building the habits that'll help maintain and transition to the bigger changes they're looking for is really important. And like you said, also like having the accountability partners or the support to be able to help people realize when they're slipping, or give them the encouragement and reinforcement to push past the self-sabotage that we're wired for, is really important. And it's when you're working with people in this, and since it sounds like you follow up and have these communities, what are some of the transformations you've seen people go through, like that when they go through the experience, they have a great eye-opening revelations, and they come home and apply it? What have some of the impacts been that you've seen over the years?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. Most of the time it falls into one of two categories: love or work. And in the love category, not getting the connection, not getting the intimacy that they want. And in the work arena, not feeling a sense of connection to the work they're doing, not feeling a sense of meaning, or whatever that may be. And so big part of our work is just to help people actually get clear, admit to themselves that this is a problem, that they've been lying to themselves for, potentially for years, that it's okay, it's fine. And once people actually connect, and we're trying to get people to actually connect with the feeling, connect with their body, but how this actually feels in their body, because our mind can rationalize these things and just say, oh, it's fine, like all marriages are like this, or it's fine, nobody nobody has real sense of meaning or purpose in their work. But when we actually connect people to their body and they feel it, they feel that sense of anger, or that sense of grief or sadness or despair, whatever that may be, and they become much more clear about their real desire. So I'll give you an example without betraying any confidence. There was a guy who was with us in Iceland a couple of weeks ago, and on the surface, he showed up with this energy of, my life is great, like we've built the most amazing life and it's perfect life. And what came out of that through some digging was that he really lacked emotional connection with his partner, and physical connection, intimacy, and he craved it deeply, but he didn't know how to ask for it. And so, part of the coaching with that is like helping him get clear that this is a real deep need. It's a deep need that he convinced himself that he didn't really need it, that it's fine, they could coexist kind of as roommates and business partner, whatever, but he really wanted intimacy. And so helping him tap into that, but also helping him tap into, what does that conversation look like? Because often that conversation can manifest as like, you don't do this for me, and you don't do that, and you don't give me enough connection, you don't give me intimacy, rather than an approach of, hey, I really value connection. I would really love to connect with you more deeply. Really love, more intimacy. Could we explore that together? So putting the emphasis back on himself, his own needs, no focus on his partner, but just expressing his needs and desires. And then, he got back and he texted me the day after, and he said, I just had one of the best nights with my partner I've had in a really long time. And, there was all sorts of kind of racy emojis in there, if you can imagine. So those are some examples, but also helping people get, around the work arena. It doesn't necessarily mean, sometimes it manifests and people will actually realize they need to make some hard decisions, and they need to make some hard endings. So there was a woman who came to Ecuador with me a few years back, and the pinnacle moment of that experience was an attempt to summit Mount Cotopaxi, which is an almost 20,000 foot volcano. This is a big undertaking, and we had the group training for months leading up to this, and she was going into it with sort of this energy like, I'm not going to make it, but I'm going to give it my best shot. So we really tried to get her anchored, like, I'm going to make it to the top of that mountain. Lo and behold, she did make it to the top of the mountain. She made it. She and her partner, you're roped in with another person and a guide. They were the last ones to the top of the mountain. They made it, I think, a few minutes before the 8 a.m. turnaround time, because you have to get off the mountain at a certain time. But she made it at the top of the mountain, and that was the beginning of a series of cascading changes in her life. And for her, that experience helped her see just how powerful she is. And there was a couple of decisions around her business and her marriage that she'd been avoiding for years. And she came home with the strength to actually, make the decision to leave a marriage that was not working for her or her partner, and leave a business that she was no longer aligned with. And that was a couple of years ago, and the life she's living now is very different. She's much more aligned, more joyous. So it manifests in all sorts of different ways. And when it comes to marriages, my default is always invest in yourself, invest in your own inner work, invest in the relationship before you make the decision to pull the cord. Give that a proper try first. But after that, if you decide that this relationship is no longer working for me, then by all means have the courage to leave it, and have the courage to go and find the love that you want.
Wow, those are two great examples of the power of these retreats and getting out of your normal routine and being able to really focus on yourself and being much more connected with oneself than people allow themselves to or make time for in their normal busy lives these days. And I can see how for that woman, the summiting that really high peak and getting that boost of self-confidence, and then being able to bring that back and make some big life changes that were long overdue, and now being much happier because they finally pushed past the fear of those big changes must have been a huge transformation. And for the first example, that the guy being able to be vulnerable and open up to his partner and have a much better experience there is really powerful. And I think it's something that, like you touched on earlier, people keep trying to rationalize away their situations and make excuses for the status quo when if they actually took the time to listen to their bodies and focus on that, then they realize just how the rationalizations don't hold any water when under scrutiny. And it's worth scrutinizing them in the way that getting out of their normal routines and habits enables them to. So that's really powerful stuff. Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Mike. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection Podcast, please like, leave a comment, and subscribe. If you want to connect with myself or Mike, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.